The following is an original production of AZPM News.
For Arizona Public Media, I'm Erika Hamden, professor of astrophysics at the University of Arizona, and this is Arizona Science. Joining me today is Alexander Bucksch, associate professor at the University of Arizona School of Plant Sciences. Alex's research focuses on plant roots and how they behave from the population level all the way down to the molecular level. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you, Erika. Nice to be here.
So you recently had a paper come out about beans and specifically about like a very particular type of cell in their roots, which could be really important for drought-tolerant crops in the future. Can you tell us a little bit about the paper and the cells?
We came a few years ago, came across a weird observation that we simply didn't know what it is. We had a completely different experiment in mind. We just wanted to look at stress responses in root hairs, and suddenly they all had little hooks. And then we thought like, ooh, what is this? They should be actually straight, and they weren't. And then we started looking into it.
Okay, and so these like hooks, like what are they actually doing for the plant?
So that is actually the open question. We don't know exactly what the hook is doing. What we do know is that a single cell that comes out of the root and just stretches out and makes this hook, it actually interacts with the soil and it takes up phosphorus and nitrogen, which is just your standard components of a fertilizer, right? And then it puts a little wax over the cell so that it does not dry out in drought, or it basically regulates how water gets in and out of this cell and therefore also into the root. So it helps the plant very early on in the first few days already to establish itself and to grow, even if the environment might be not that favorable.
So this is in like newly growing, like plants that are growing from seeds, not a very established plant?
No, so we only observed it in the first few days. So when the seed just forms the little first tiny root and starts to establish itself.
What are some of the challenges even? I mean, maybe do you think one of the reasons that no one has seen them is because it's like actually really hard to study roots?
If you think about all the imaging technology out there, most often it's electromagnetic waves, and then electromagnetic things and the soil don't work well together. There's so much iron in there. So yeah, we are not good at observing root. In reality, even if you look at mature roots in the field, we mostly dig them up to look at them.
If you're just digging plants up in the field, wouldn't that damage these like really tiny and maybe fragile structures?
If you just dig them up in the field, it would definitely hurt them. We took these seeds into the lab and grew them in small little dishes where we can look at the first few days. Okay. So these hooked hairs come out during the first 2 to 3 days, and that's when you don't see anything above ground. So there is no shoot to it. There's no leaf at this stage. It's just the root that develops first into the ground. Okay. Because you need to first get your food, right? You need to eat, and then you can grow.
Before you make a leaf.
Exactly.
So how do you feel like this research could be applied to future kind of crops or to additional work that you want to do?
So first of all, we think about just screening it a lot across a lot of common beans. So common bean is just a term for something like pinto bean that you have in your burrito or so. But there are many, many different ones. And so we thought maybe we start there and see, is there variation between different kinds of beans so that we could start selecting for it or have a breeder breeding for a certain amount of these kind of hooked hairs. We don't know how much variation there is between different varieties that you have out there. And then certainly there's the question, is it somewhere else in other plants? We don't know that. We only know it's not in soybean. But common bean and soybean are really different species.
And so this could be helpful like when you're in the sort of initial planting phase of a field, that like if you put out a bunch of seed and then it happens to be dry.
Right, it just helps the plant to actually get going just at the very beginning in the first few days. And if you think about that, farmers, there's somewhere between 5 and 20% they anyhow calculate will die in the field when they plant.
Yeah. So on your webpage, it says that you do root phenomics ranging from the population level to the molecular level. So what is phenomics?
Phenomics comes from a Greek word that says to appear. If you want to characterize something, it's basically everything that we see. Now, we look nowadays with a lot of technology to things. So we can actually see more than we can see by our eyes. So we use a lot of sensors and data and also mathematical models to look at plants. So we have always kind of a very formal foundation under everything that we do before we start going into searching for genes or doing any kind of experiment. So the hypotheses that we create are all based on a very solid data foundation. That's a bit of the difference to a purely wet lab-driven approach.
What do you hope the long-term impact of your work is going to be?
The long-term impact is always, we need more food. There is no question. This planet needs more food. We are running out of that, and we are not probably producing enough food for everybody on that planet very, very soon. I think it's the last projection I heard. It always varies a bit, but it was 2042 that there's not enough food on the planet to feed everybody. That is always a motivation where I started. And then it grew up further to things like how do we sustainably live on that planet? How do we keep that planet in shape so that we can live on that planet? I think that is a huge question, and having plants growing is a key to that.
Yeah.
So without plants, we cannot survive.
I think the obvious application is things like what we talked about, like in agriculture. But if you're trying to, can think of trying to rewild landscapes where you want the native plants to come back and you want to give them a boost above invasive species or just get them started. Do you feel like that could be a use case?
So now I'm exactly in the situation like with my program officer where I didn't thought about that. So I would be interested.
Feel free to take that idea.
Yeah, no, I would love to. I wrap my mind around it right now, and I don't see that this is really easy because this means we have to modify wild plants.
Yeah.
That said, in another project we look what these whole populations do with each other and how they interact. So there might be a way to deliver maybe certain genes from one plant to the other, just by the mechanisms how plants interact. People always think that when roots intertangle, this must be competition. It might be not. I mean, we humans, we just hug and we exchange a lot of information. Why should plants not do the same below ground and just exchange information by touching each other? So we are thinking into these directions, and if we can use these kind of mechanisms down the line
to encourage the rest of the plants to adapt.
Exactly, to do the same. And this happens above ground already. So there are folks that think about or that deliver chemicals from one plant to the other to trigger certain defense responses against pests. So it's not a mechanism that is not known.
Yeah. So a lot of activities happening below ground that we are only lightly aware of.
There's so much we can just simply not see, and everything is kind of microscopic. Unless it's a root, it's really, really tiny, right?
Yeah.
But even the root, if we take it out of the ground, what you see is perhaps 90% of the biomass. But what you see as an area is perhaps 10%. All these very fine roots that get nutrients from very far away. So think if you see a corn plant, it's about 10 feet in each direction. It goes very far. So that's also how it intertangles with the neighbors.
Yeah.
So there must be some kind of touch always happening.
Yeah, some connections that help them figure out who gets what.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking with us, Alex. I love learning about plants, and I feel like there's so much stuff going on below ground that really impacts our lives that we are only lightly aware of. So I hope with more of your work, we'll start to have a deeper understanding. Pun intended.
Cool. Thank you for doing this here.
This is Erika Hamden, and you've been listening to Arizona Science. We've been talking with Alex Bucksch, who studies the hidden behavior of plant roots and their impact on our lives. You can hear more of this conversation and others on our Arizona Science segments by going to azpm.org/Arizona Science.
This has been an original production of AZPM News.